Welcome to The Straight Stitch, a podcast about sewing and other fiber arts. This is episode 117, and my name is Janet Szabo. I'll be your guide as we explore all things sewing. I am still stuck in that season of not much sewing because we're trying to get everything ready for spring planting. I did, on Friday, take a trip over to Spokane to attend the Quilt Craft and Sewing Festival that I talked about in last week's episode. Someone had asked me if I knew anything about these events, and it just so happened that I was planning to go over there. I went with the daughter of the woman who owns our quilt store here in town where I teach. Her daughter, Ashley, is the operations manager at the store, and I texted Ashley about a week and a half ago and said, hey, would you have any interest in going over? And she jumped at the chance because she wanted to see if it was a show that the store might possibly be a vendor at. The store is usually a vendor at the Washington State Quilter Show in October in Spokane, so going to Spokane to vend at a show is not out of the question. But Ashley wanted to evaluate this show and see if it would be a good fit for them. So I drove in and parked my car at the store, and Ashley met me there at 6 a.m, and we headed over to Spokane. It's a 4-hour drive, but we gain an hour going over. We actually could have left at 7 and still made it in plenty of time, but we never know what the weather's going to be like, and we never know what the traffic is going to be like. So the weather was great, traffic was light, and we got to the fairgrounds in Spokane around 9:30. The show was being held in the big expo building at the fairgrounds, which is a very large barn with 2 bays on each side and a center section. And the center section had displays of all sorts of quilts. And I'm not sure how they solicited the quilts that were in the display. I did see some ribbons, but I couldn't tell if those ribbons had been given as part of this show or maybe they had been in the fair and the exhibitor just decided to include the ribbon with the quilt. I should have done a little bit better job of tracking that. At 10 o'clock, the show opened and we were allowed to go in to the vendor areas, and Ashley and I started walking around and looking at all of the booths. And these are my impressions of the show. First of all, this is the first year that I believe they've had this show in Spokane. The promotional company that runs this is called Rusty Barn Productions, and they're based in Salt Lake City. And it looks like they have these shows all over the West. So all the way from Arizona up to Washington. And they're spread out throughout the year, although there seems to be a cluster of them in May. I know that in November, there will be a show in Puyallup at the same venue where Sew Expo is held. Unfortunately, I've got a conflict that weekend, so I probably am not going to be able to make it over to that show. I'd be curious to see how they differ in the different geographical areas. So this was not a large show. I would say there were maybe 30 vendors. The interesting thing to me was that most of the vendors were selling the same thing. There was a lot of wool embroidery and kind of primitive design, so think primitive gatherings. I saw very little in the way of modern quilting. I saw a lot of panels, and I know they display well in booths. I saw a few vendors that had also been at Sew Expo. By and large, though, almost all of the vendors were selling very similar items. I am a Tim Holtz fangirl, and I have most of the palette collection that came out last year. And if I had needed more, there were 3 or 4 vendors that had a whole bunch of Tim Holtz fabric that I could have purchased. The show itself had been billed as a sewing and garment, or quilting and garment sewing show, but there was only one booth that had any garment fabric, and they only had 2 bolts of a rayon woven. And that was it for the whole show. All in all, we spent about 2 hours there. You might think that it's a bit ridiculous to drive 4 hours to Spokane, spend 2 hours at the show, and drive 4 hours back. We actually went and got some lunch. Ashley found a great little Mexican restaurant, and I had the Friday special, which was life-changing fish tacos. I'm still thinking about those fish tacos because they were so good. And after lunch, we decided to stop in at a couple of the local quilt stores. We went to the Quilting Bee, which is a fairly large quilting store, and they actually had been one of the sponsors of the quilting show that we went to at the fairgrounds. They are under new ownership. They have been for about a year, a little over a year, and they are making an effort to carry more garment fabrics, and I was able to find a bolt of black Kona Crush. I love Kona Crush. I love Kona. I have 2 dressers up in my sewing area that are full of nothing but Kona. And last year, Robert Kaufman came out with Kona Crush, which is kind of a lighter weight cotton that has a permanent texture to it. It looks wrinkled, and I love it for garments. I love it for pants. This Saturday, I'll be teaching a men's jogger pants class at the store, and I made the class sample out of Kona Crush, and the pants look phenomenal. So I was really excited to find the black Kona Crush because unfortunately the mill isn't making it any longer, and we don't have black at our store. So I bought the 5 yards that were left on the bolt. The Quilting Bee was also having a 20% off sale because of it being the quilt show weekend. And the only other thing I bought, and I had picked this up at the show, was the Laura quilted jacket from Melly and Me. I really like the Melly and Me designs, and it looks like this quilted jacket is drafted very well. I need to stop making quilted jackets, but maybe next fall I'll get back to it. Ashley and I left Spokane about 1:30, and I was home by 7 o'clock. We lost an hour going back. So all in all, it was a good day. I'm glad we went. We had a lot to talk about on the way there and on the way back. But I will be curious to see if this show continues to be held in Spokane and if it continues to grow. So if anyone else has been to one of these shows, I'd be curious to hear your experiences. I'm going to stop talking now because I have a great interview for you. It is with Cristina Phaneuf, who owns Bumbleroot Designs. Cristina and I have been internet friends since about 2017 or so. We bonded over a shared love of vintage sewing machines on Facebook, and she went on to start a successful bag design company, and I've been wanting to have her on the show for a while, but we just reconnected, and I want to let you hear Christina's story from Cristina herself. So I am here with Cristina, and she is going to tell us all about her business, Bumbleroot Design. So Cristina, we were just talking about when it was that we quote unquote met, because we've never really met in person. And you and I were
Right.
both heavily into Necky sewing machines for a while. And so we did
Yes.
a lot of talking on the Necky Facebook groups,
Yes. Trying to fix our machines
right?
and get them to sew perfectly. Yep.
And you and I both have a Necky BV industrial machine. So that was, I think, one
Yes.
of the things that we bonded over.
hmm Right. I remember you saying that if there was a fire, that was the machine you would grab. And I completely agree. It is my absolute favorite.
Well, we will talk about your sewing setup in a little bit, but I usually start by
Mhm.
asking people how long they've been sewing. How long have you been sewing and who taught you?
Well, my mom taught me how to hand sew as a kid, and so I made Barbie clothes all the time. I had bags and bags of Barbie clothes that I wish I still had today, but I don't. Then I had to take home ec in seventh grade, so I remember making a pillow. I don't remember if we used machines or if that was hand sewn. And then after I was married, I had wanted to learn how to hem things, just various things. So my husband bought me a machine, which is something I never would have, you know, bought myself, but I learned to hem. I took a class where I learned to do a blind hem and made a lot of things for my kids, like sleep sacks and stuff. And eventually uh, let's see, what year would it have been? 2015 was when I deep dove and started sewing for real, and decided I wanted to learn to make Roman shades. And from that, I decided to start Bumbleroot Design, which was not going to be Roman shades, but I started with aprons and pillows.
I have an apron that you made me,
hmm
and I think you called that
Modern farmhouse
modern farmhouse.
was,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, that was my original aesthetic. I was in Massachusetts at the time, and modern farmhouse was exploding. And I really liked the look and thought I could go with it. So yeah, my original tagline for Bumbleroot Design was Modern Farmhouse. I actually intended to be in local shops, and I had stopped into one local shop that sold pillows made by somebody local, and she mentioned that she wanted to start carrying aprons. So that was actually what started me on the whole apron business was I created aprons for her shop. And I wanted something unique, so I made them reversible. I don't like aprons that tie at the back of your neck. I have sensory issues, and I wanted to figure something out. Um, so I worked on that, came up with my own pattern, my own sizing. And initially, I was trying to upcycle fabrics. So I would go to the thrift store and buy tablecloths or old curtains, wash them a lot, and then made some aprons with them. Because I thought the upcycling would go well with the modern farmhouse idea. Yeah, and I also met the person who was making those pillows, and we ended up, staying in touch for a while. So that was pretty cool.
Somewhere in there, there was a move from Massachusetts to New Jersey. Were you still doing aprons and modern farmhouse when you got to New Jersey, or had you started in bags by then?
I had already started in bags. So I did aprons and pillows around the same time, and eventually, um, I kind of stopped making the aprons and focused more on the pillows. But at the same time, I decided I needed a new wallet. And as a crafter, why buy one when you can spend a bazillion dollars and learn to make them yourself? I got into making my own wallets and I discovered patterns, possibly through you. I'm not sure because I didn't know of the existence of sewing patterns. I mean, I knew clothing patterns existed. I didn't know bag patterns existed. Um, so I found a bag pattern for a wallet, and there was no turning back. I kind of dropped everything else and just went headlong into bag making. I became a tester for one of the first patterns that I had tried out, like that designer took me under her wing, and I just had started the bags. That was probably 2016. 2017, something around that time. So I mostly was making bags and wallets at that point, but I was making modern farmhouse pillows for a local shop, which featured like the zip code, because that was a huge thing there and it was really successful.
Let's talk a little bit about what you did before you dropped everything to sew and what your career path was, because I think that dovetails pretty well with what you're doing now.
So I am a technical writer career-wise. I write the help manuals for software. I worked in big tech for over 30 years, pretty much since college and internship. I ended up, after a year or so of making bags, I decided to start making my own patterns, and I was able to write my tutorials for the pattern pretty much exactly the way I wrote my help manuals. I had decades of experience writing instructions, and I started to learn how to illustrate a little more, because when you're writing a pattern and you're taking photos, if you make a mistake, you have to start all over with the materials and everything. And I realized very early on that it's easier to illustrate my directions instead of trying to photograph, because it's just a lot easier to edit an illustration than to start all over.
Well-written instructions are one of my pet peeves, I guess. It's one of the
Hmm.
things that I'm fairly particular about. I don't like to see poorly written directions, and I've looked at your patterns and they are very
Hmm.
well done. So,
Thank you. Yeah, I am very precise. Like I want to get exactly the right words and exactly the right order. Um, I also want to make it foolproof so that you don't feel like you have to wing any part of it. Because something I learned early on, even as a technical writer, is that a lot of writers assume a lot of the person who's reading your work. They assume a level of knowledge or assumption. I don't know. There's just a lot of assumptions, and I make no assumptions. I assume you know nothing. I assume that you don't know how to do certain things. So I try to include as much detail as I can, but I also know the attention span is short. So I have to kind of balance how much information I give, the format in which I give it. No one's going to read 3 paragraphs per step. It just doesn't. So I try to give crucial information in a very targeted way, and accuracy is everything. I'm revisiting one of my patterns now, and I found a mistake. And instead of just fixing that one little mistake, I'm going through the entire thing and kind of updating it with additional information I've learned over the years.
it's amazing to me what trips people up. I'll write class
Yep.
handouts or instructions, and somebody will stumble over something that just it never crossed my mind that that would be
Yes.
an
Yeah.
issue. So I
Yes.
assume that
That
you have a group of testers.
I do. I was just going to say that it's really important to have testers because you have no idea what anybody is going to do. And I like to have a variety of testers. Like I like to have somebody who's just going to read the grammar and read the text. I like to have somebody who tends to not like to read and they think they already know how to do everything. I like to have people who follow every single step as written and see what happens. As part of my update for this pattern, I'm preparing for a class I'm going to teach on it, and I thought I followed my directions, and it came out wrong. I'm like, this looks wrong. Like what happened? So that's how I realized I could make this step a lot clearer by adding an illustration, and just a little bit more information. So yeah, having a tester team is super important when you want to make sure that you're kind of accounting for everything.
So how many patterns do you have right now?
Yeah, I
It's
have about 12 patterns, and I haven't written a new pattern in a few years. It's something I kind of put on hold for a bit while I explored getting my designs manufactured,
Talk about that a little
which
bit.
was
Was that what was involved with that process?
so that was not something that was really ever on my mind because I like making things myself. But I met somebody locally who her job is to connect designers with the factories, which I found was such a random coincidence that I found somebody who does exactly that. And I said, you know what? Let's try it. Let's see what happens. Um, it was a huge learning curve. Um, and I ended up not going forward with it because there was too much I wanted to change. Um, and that was in 2023, so that was a while ago. It's been on my mind as something that I think I would like to explore more. I just haven't gone full steam ahead on that yet.
I'm curious, did it feel like too much of it was being taken out of your control?
I think what really happened was I didn't know enough about what I needed to ask for. You know, because I can make my own bags, I thought I could hand over my bag and have it just duplicated as is. And that was not the case. There were changes I wanted to make that I thought would improve the bag, and I ended up signing up for a master course with somebody who is in the design business and knows a lot of the top designers. And she looked at my, factory bag, and it was dated. Like that was her comment. This is dated. And I'm like, ooh, you're right. It is. So I felt like I needed to learn more about fashion and what bags are actually like on the runway, and take that into account in addition to what I want the bag to look like, or um, how I want it to end up. I just feel like there's so much that I need to marry that I just didn't know enough about to really jump in and make that investment in something that may or may not work. The master class that I took really focused on figuring out your target market and doing the market research. And that was a whole side of things that I hadn't done at all. I just did like, I like this bag myself. I think it looks cool. I think other people would like it. Um, but without doing all of the market research, which is a huge part of design, um, I didn't really have a product that I was confident would sell.
It's good that you recognize that and were able to kind of step back and
Hmm.
say, I need to work on this more. Because
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of people might have just gone full steam ahead and not had a good experience.
Yes. And I think for me, I am not as interested in the runway and the all of that research. Like I like to make things. I like to create. I like to see like what's in my mind and then make it and see the products that I kind of made up. That's the part that I love. And I started to worry that I was going to take the joy out of it by going down this road that almost takes an entirely new skill set and also takes the creativity out of it. Um, I still think there's a way to do it. Just the way that I kind of jumped in was not the right way for me to do it. It wasn't going to be a fun and enjoyable path. So I stepped back. It's been 3 years now. I still talk about potentially doing, getting factory work involved, but it needs to stew a little more.
So, are you selling mostly patterns? Do you sell your finished bags? Combination of both?
So the move to New Jersey has been interesting because in Massachusetts, I was doing pretty well. My pillows were selling, my patterns were selling, my bags were mostly selling. And that was even at farmers markets where I wouldn't expect people are going to buy a handbag. And I moved to New Jersey in September of 2019. I live right near a very affluent mall that has like Louis Vuitton and very high-end Gucci designers, all those stores. Um, so the area that I'm in, I realized pretty quickly is not interested in handmade bags, um, because it's a very brand central area where people want the name brand bag. Um, so I kind of had to pause on the stuff that I was making, and I wanted to focus more on the patterns. And then COVID hit a few months later after moving, and that kind of put a stop on everything. Also, modern farmhouse is not a thing here at all. I talk to people about zip code pillows. They're like, what? Like, why? Why would you do that? I know it's been years, but during that time was when I explored the manufacturing, and that was kind of a year-long process. So I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do here in this area and what will work. And in the meantime, I'm focusing on selling my patterns, and refocusing, I guess, on Bumbleroot Design versus I had created a new brand for my finished bags, and I'm kind of putting that on hold for now and focusing more on Bumbleroot Design and advertising my patterns. And I still have so many ideas of bags that I was going to create for this manufacturing side of things that if I'm not going to do that, I might just create patterns for them.
And it sounds like you're also going to start teaching.
Yes. So in August, no, sometime last summer, somebody reached out to me on Facebook and said she had a local sewing studio and wanted to know if I was looking for studio space to move into. Um, I had always wanted to do that because taking up a bedroom in my house has been a challenge with all my machines. I have several. Um, and so I met with her. She's in the next town. It's really close. And it was just a perfect fit. So I was able to move all of my stuff into a room in her studio, which has several rooms. And she brings in a lot of different teachers. She herself is a fashion designer, so she teaches apparel. But she has other people come in for quilting classes and needlepoint work and stuff. And I thought I could start teaching bag making, for people who have already done the quilting and the apparel and maybe want to start working with a different kind of, I don't know, different materials, different skill set. I had also gotten very deep into leather and faux leather and really substantial materials, which I've also discovered takes an entirely new skill set, new materials, like so many tools, and it was taking away from what I really loved, which was working with fabrics, like natural fibers. I like cotton, I like linen, um, and after working with leather for a couple of years and moving into the studio really made me realize like I miss the fabrics. I miss the thick, I like to work with home decor fabrics. And I miss the feel and the drape and the patterns and the colors. So in deciding to teach this class, I had to make sure that my pattern works for fabrics as well as it does for leather. And it just like reignited like I'm shopping for fabric again, which I don't need to do. I have enough fabric for the rest of my life. Um, but shopping for fabrics again, it's like, oh, this is the part that I really loved. And so I'm excited to teach other people how to make one of my patterns completely out of fabric and say like, okay, this is something you can do on your home machine. Like you don't need the special tools, all those tools that I bought for leather. You don't need that. You don't need to learn how to paint the edges of the leather, and you don't have to worry about super thick seams. And I feel like it's going to be kind of me getting back to what I loved and what made me start all of this in the first place. So I'm really excited. And I've met a couple of the people that signed up for my class and they're very excited for it. So it might be a one and done, or it might be the start of many classes.
I can hear the excitement.
Hmm.
So this sounds like it's going to be a really positive thing.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. And one of the reasons I wanted to move into the studio when she invited me was because I felt like I was going in so many different directions and I just couldn't decide what to do. And I was chasing after these leather skills, and I was chasing after, wanting to work with a factory. And I feel like I was so scattered that I wasn't really getting anything done because I had too many goals. And one thing I really wanted with the studio and I could envision it. I said, having this space is going to help me filter down to what I actually really want to do. And I kind of pictured it like rain, like everything was going to be dripping and dropping, and I was going to be left with what I really want to do. So this is a step in that direction. We're going to see if this is what I really want to do, but I know for sure I really want to get back to working with fabrics.
Let's talk a little bit about your sewing setup and the machines that you use.
Yes. So I had originally started with, a modern Kenmore sewing machine, and it was not stitching the way I wanted it to. Like I would look at professionally made items and I'd be like, I want my stitches to look like that. That led me to vintage sewing machines. And that led me into collecting vintage sewing machines. I had several. They all had beautiful stitches once I fixed them up. So I learned through YouTube and the Facebook groups how to fix my own machines. And I decided I would only use a machine that I know how to fix. I didn't want to have to take an electric machine to the shop. I didn't want to be stopped from working. I wanted to be able to handle any issues that happened. So after a couple of years of using domestic machines and getting beautiful stitches, I decided it was time to jump to an industrial machine. I love industrial machines now. So I have the Necky BV, which was, I don't know if that was my first industrial machine, but it definitely became an absolute favorite. I love everything about it. Um, and after a while, I picked up another machine that is called a compound feed, which is basically a walking foot. Um, that will feed all the layers of the material evenly at the same time so you don't end up with uneven layers. And I found that I needed that for more of the leather work that I was doing. So I have those two are my main machines. When I was in the rabbit hole of trying to figure out if I wanted to go into leather or not, I did buy one brand new machine. And I look at it and I feel a little bit embarrassed that I have one brand new machine, but it does come in handy. It is a cylinder bed, so it can sew very tight spaces. I actually don't use that machine very much because I definitely prefer the other two, the older machines for sure. So those are my three machines. I also have an industrial serger for when I make pillows. I still am making some pillows and I like to serge the edges. And it is so fast and so quiet compared to a domestic serger. Um, I mean, my domestic serger, I still have it here at home for when I make pillows here. And whenever I have to serge the edges, it's like it sounds like a jet engine. It's so loud and it feels like it's gonna just start steaming. But in the studio, I can use the industrial serger and it's just like tick, 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 tick. It's such a lovely sound.
When you talk about your cylinder bed machine, I think it's probably one of those machines that you don't use very often, but when you need it, you need it.
Yes, yeah, it is. It does come in handy. I mean, right now I'm working, and this is a whole other thing that we can talk about. I am working for a local business owner who started a pickleball business. She has gear, apparel, and bags. And she started this, I think, during COVID or shortly after COVID, and it has exploded. She and I met through a local community that we're both a part of. She asked me if I would be able to sew D-ring tabs onto her existing tote bags. And I tried on my Necky and it couldn't do it. I tried on my console, it couldn't do it. I tried on the cylinder bed and it works. I don't know what the difference is, but so I'm basically doing that. She brings me a stack of tote bags every once in a while to put the D-rings on. And I use the cylinder bed for that. But in addition to that, she wanted to bring a new bag into her line and had her factory make a backpack or a sling, I guess it was like a one-shot backpack. And she did not like the sample she received. And she asked me if I would meet with her to consult on what was wrong with the bag because she couldn't figure out what she didn't like. And that was so fun meeting with her because I saw right away, I'm like, oh, this I don't like, this I don't like. I don't know why they sewed it this way. This sewing is terrible. Like, I was able to pick apart so many things that gave words to what she had felt when seeing it. And she ended up asking me to design a new bag. So I actually designed the bag for her. I gave her some illustrations and dimensions, and she found some pocket design from elsewhere that she wanted to know if I could incorporate that. So I kind of added it in. We sent my design off to the factory, and the first sample came back not quite right. At that point, it was just little tweaks that we needed to make because it was already years better than the original sample. And then the final bag came in and it's amazing. I love it. So that was fun. And that was something that I might consider doing again is designing a bag as a consultant. I'm not a very experienced illustrator, so I can't do like a full explosion 3D version, but I can do enough to get you started with what the bag will look like and the dimensions. Like I'm completely about like what are the dimensions? And also I know what is possible with sewing and what isn't. Which really helps because I think some people have an idea in their head and I'm like, I don't know how you can do that. Like that's not really doable, but this other way of doing it will be kind of similar and is doable with a sewing machine.
I'm kind of chuckling to myself because my husband and I just had that conversation over the weekend because he's always bringing me these projects and saying, "Can you make this?" And then there's a
Hmm.
lot of back and forth between us because I'm like, that won't work. This will work better. So I think
Hmm.
there are a lot of people out there who would probably want a similar service where they could go to somebody and say, "Here's my idea, but I don't know how to
Hmm.
make it happen."
Yeah. And it was an interesting experience seeing what the factory did with the illustration and learning how clear you need to be. Like down to the like you have to say you only want it to have 2 inches of excess strap, or you want the end to be tucked in further, or you had to give such precise measurements. And I had learned this, unfortunately, with my factory experience, where I assumed that a factory would know how to make an adjustable bag strap. So I just said how long the strap needed to be, and I provided the hardware. And it came back, and there was the slider for adjusting the strap was just on a single layer of strap, and there nothing was folded, nothing. It was just and I had to buy this leather from Italy. I provided the leather. They had to use the whole length of it because a strap is very long. And it was a non-adjustable strap that just had this slider on it for decor. I mean, it was really just decoration. It did nothing. And I was shocked. I was like, oh, I didn't realize I had to tell you how to do this. And I ended up having to send in one of my made straps to say, okay, this is what you should do with it. I made a lot of assumptions about the factory. And just like I can't make assumptions to anybody using my patterns, I can't make any assumptions at all to a factory who's doing this, because they might be normally an apparel factory. Maybe they know how to handle apparel, but they don't necessarily know how to make a bag strap. They might not be just a bag factory. And who knows what the turnover is like. So every single little detail, which someone like me who makes bags, I'm aware of every single detail, but a designer who has an idea or who just bought a bag and wants to replicate it doesn't necessarily see all of those little details. Um, it's 1,000% important if you're going to involve a factory, is you have to know every single little thing that needs to go into that bag.
Well, we have talked longer than I thought we were going to, which is fine. I figured
Mhm.
we'd probably get off on some tangents. And is there anything you want us to know? Can you give us your website? And
Yeah, so my website is bumblerootdesign.com.
where did the name come
I
from?
so back in, I don't know, when the internet first started, whenever that was, they would have name generators, where you would put in, your first initial or whatever. And this one was my Hobbit name, was Bumbleroot. I think at the time I was designing websites, or I was going to start designing websites. And I decided Bumbleroot Design sounded good. I want to say I Googled it. I don't know if Googling was a thing back then, but I did check. I did check to see if Bumbleroot Design was in use or not, and it wasn't. So I took it on as my business name for website design, and that was before kids, so that was a very long time ago. When I decided to start the sewing business, Bumbleroot Design still wasn't in use by anyone else, so I decided to resurrect the name. And I love it. I think I love the name.
It is. It's a very memorable name. So, do you have an
Hmm.
Instagram account?
I do. It is bumbleroot.design. And I also have one for my finished bags, which is less active now because I haven't been focusing on it, and that is Tina Lucia Bags. And I link both, like you can get to one from the other. But for now, I'm focusing on Bumbleroot Design. I had created a new website, tinalucia.com, where I was planning for manufactured bags, but I just months ago I took a step back and switched back to Bumbleroot Design to focus more on the patterns and pillows. And we'll see if someday I resurrect Tina Lucia bags. But for now, that is just not my focus.
Well, I appreciate you giving me some of your time for an interview. I so enjoyed catching up with Christina and talking about sewing machines and bags. and I hope you'll check out her social media. Thank you for all the emails and the reviews and the suggestions that I've gotten for future guest interviews. I'm tracking down all of those suggestions, so keep them coming. If you want to leave a comment, you can do so on the show notes page. The podcast website is www.thestraightstitchpodcast.com. My website is www.janetzabo.com, and that has links to my Big Sky Knitting Designs website as well as my blog. You can see pictures of gardening projects and chicks, and next month there will be piglet pictures. You can use the fan mail feature to send feedback, and you are welcome to email me at janet@janetzabo.com with any comments or questions. I am off to tackle a painting project at our rental house and hoping after that I might get to do a little bit of sewing. So until next episode, I hope you have a great week and that you get to go sew something.